Welcome to AJR's Ask the Editor. I'm Jake Whitaker, Director of Marketing and Communications for the Rank and Ray. Recently, we put out a call for your AJR questions, and now it's time for answers straight from the source. I'm here with AJR's Editor-in-Chief, Dr. Andrew Rosenkrantz, to dive into what you wanted to know. Dr. Rosenkrantz, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
In terms of topics, what are you looking for in an article at this point?
There's kind of this blend, right? We want stuff that's novel, timely, and cutting edge, but also relevant, practical, useful. So there's almost kind of this sweet spot in kind of covering both of those bases. The work should be usable. It doesn't mean that readers are using it today, right? Because if we say readers are using it today, then we're not going to necessarily be changing practice. But if the reader finds that article interesting and wanting to apply it, they should be able to avail themselves to whatever, material or technology is being discussed in that work. They should be able to access it. We do want stuff that's clinically oriented, that's practical, that relates to radiologists' day-to-day work. But even when I say that, and as time goes by, I kind of see more and more, there's some kind of judgment in just what that means in terms of being practical. So we've had plenty of phantom studies where the phantom setup allows the authors to approach their question with some rigor that would be hard to do in a clinical setting, but still delivers an interesting message for readers. As a journal, we try to cover hot topics of the day. So of late, we've had articles on photon counting detector CT, large language models, but still try to approach those topics with rigor. So it should be interesting to pass a so what test. I've been focusing here on the topic, but as critical as the topic is also the execution. So we can have two articles on the same topic, but just one is packaged and presented and executed much better. And that would be the one that gets in, right? So it's really all of that. And I guess it's the final takeaway. So, I said we're open to everything. So there's really no specific topic that would not be of interest to look at it, on the kind of other side. It's really what you do with the topic, how you deliver the message, how you take whatever that topic it is, how you come up with some narrative that kind of has that blend of novelty and relevance.
So in terms of submissions, what are some common pitfalls that you've seen?
So for the topic, we got a lot of submissions that, unfortunately, they're just too narrow or incremental. It's something that's, I'd say sometimes just not even already been done, but already been done many, many times. It's well covered. It's well known. It just isn't new enough. It's too similar to prior works. There just isn't enough there that's different from what people already know. So there just isn't enough there that's really just new in the work. And then in terms of the execution, so a lot of these are, these might be even just the usual things you would hear about if you're going to a seminar or a course on, research methodology, study design. But at the end of the day, these are issues we see come up, all the time. So just kind of, running through kind of different pieces of the study and the manuscript. So, patient selection, sometimes you have various inclusion and exclusion criteria, and it leads to a patient sample that just isn't representative of the individuals to whom these findings would, are intended to be applied. There's some bias already baked in just from how the selection was done that kind of predispose the study to a certain outcome. Just too small of a sample size, just for the, just maybe for the frequency of some outcome event, or just for something about the particular issue that's being looked at, or the sample sizes in kind of the most relevant prior literature on that topic. Just the issue just really just calls for a larger sample, or even much larger sample than in the given submission. Just other methodologic or design flaws as well. So, just think of a radiology study having independent readers, having a sufficient number of independent readers, depending on the study, having sufficient follow-up periods, having a sufficiently strong reference standard, proper blinding of the readers, all of these things. Sometimes I've seen an otherwise well-done study, but just even one of these things can just create just too much of a barrier if it just kind of lessens kind of the extent to which we trust the results because they give an issue. just other statistical errors. So the wrong tests, statistical tests that violate certain assumptions, say having to do with independence among data points, clustering, handling of confounders. Now, as we get more and more papers with machine learning and AI, we'll want to see the analytic code. We'll prioritize external testing. The AI papers, there still should be some clinical endpoint, to the model. And then just for putting it all together as a manuscript, as an actual article, just the sections are kind of, properly executed. So, the introduction should not be an exhaustive, review on the topic. It's not a complete background. It should be focused on the specific problem, justify why the study is being done, very targeted, that the methods sometimes are just too brief. They just don't cover everything in the results. There's stuff that just is not clear. There's gaps, right? So really fully cover everything done so it can be reproduced. The results, sometimes we'll see that these are just, sometimes they make general qualifications of the data that it may not be substantiated or clear definitions or why certain terms are being used. These should be, concrete, numeric, kind of, sticking to the information, to the facts, the data itself, and not embedding interpretation in the results. Then the discussion should really be a synthesis of the data, not giving new data, and not sometimes making claims that are beyond the scope of the data, or just kind of making some wider or more kind of sweeping statements of impact that just aren't supported by the evidence in that work. I guess kind of wrapping this up on this question, I'd say, as being an author and submitting on a topic, I think it really helps to critically read the relevant literature on that topic when you go to write your article. So if you're looking to write a paper, on your study, and you have a journal in mind you're going to submit to, maybe before you start writing it, find some of the recent articles on that topic in the journal and go through them in detail. And you'll see some similarities to the structure, the flow, the design, how they're put together. You can kind of keep that overall kind of framework in mind as you write your own article.
So we've talked a little bit about AI. We've talked about large language models. We've talked about ChatGPT. To what extent can that be used in writing an article?
So in terms of use of ChatGPT in manuscript writing, so I'd say views on this have evolved over time since the large language models really first came about. So initially there were concerns, but I think that's kind of shifted and people have gotten past some of the initial reactions. And I think it's being recognized that these models can actually have benefits, can really help authors to express and communicate ideas clearly, maybe address issues with language, maybe reduce barriers in some circumstances where, varied backgrounds with just the language, could maybe, impact, authors and who's submitting and whose work is getting published. So in some ways, as I'll say, it's kind of just helped democratize knowledge. So it's not a barrier to submissions. We certainly will consider submissions where, say, the authors use ChatGPT to help in assembling the manuscript. We do kind of have some procedures around this, which are in our author guidelines. So authors do need to disclose the use of the large language model in the submission process. And this should be, a full, disclosure. So what parts of the manuscript were created by the large language model, what specific large language model technology was used, how was it used. Then we ask for the authors to give an assertion that they're responsible for the content, that they've reviewed and checked the large language model output for accuracy, for proper attribution of sources. They'll ultimately accountable for that output. And then when we publish the article, we'll include a statement with that disclosure, and we'll include the use of the large language model as it was reported by the authors. So at this point, we've had a number of articles published where you can see that.
We also received a question about whether or not it's okay to post an article on a preprint server before submitting it to the journal.
Yeah, so that's also something where I think views have been kind of shifting. So historically, what was, I'd say, good, more kind of concern regarding the preprint servers by the biomedical journals than you may see today. And I think COVID and the pandemic really changed a lot of that. So if you go further back, I'd say that the preprints, these were adopted, say, more in basic sciences, where it may have been this practice where maybe an author would put their initial, their work up initially on a preprint server, kind of get community feedback, get responses, and then edit the work and make changes based on that feedback before they then submit the paper. And it was a way of kind of more of an accepted kind of process along the way, sometimes even before the manuscript, but it just wasn't kind of, I'd say, viewed or adopted the same way among biomedical journals. During COVID, there was much wider use of preprints for biomedical research, for very rapid dissemination of knowledge, rapid science, getting materials out to the public very quickly. And I'd say that's now here to stay. It's not going away. It's now, I'd say, much more adopted in the biomedical publishing enterprise. It doesn't replace peer review, I would say, really at all. Peer review still has an invaluable role for vetting the work and then allowing for that revision process to strengthen the work and the science, and ultimately kind of get that journal's stamp on the article, lending some kind of authoritativeness and some level of kind of credibility to the work. But at this point, we will consider submissions that were previously posted on a preprint server. So there's no, outright ban against it, as you may have encountered, I'd say, more commonly by publishers years ago, right? So we can consider those submissions. This would generally be on a case by case basis as those submissions come in. We do have some guidance around this in our author guidelines on the website. So in this submission, we ask that you disclose the preprint, including the DOI and URL link. And then if the article is ultimately accepted and published by us, then we ask that at that point, the preprint version be updated to include a link back to the official version, the version of record on the journal website. So after the peer review, revision, and publication process, the version that's on the preprint version should essentially be frozen as of the version before the submission process. The final version after review, revision, and publication really is housed just on the journal, website. That the preprint version doesn't get updated to match, but just includes a link back to the version of record in the journal. And then the last point I would note, kind of a little bit of an exception to this, and we haven't seen this commonly, but it can happen. Some of the preprint servers, that they may apply certain licenses to the preprints, or an option for the license depending on how the author uploads it, and options that they check that could impose certain terms to the preprint that may be incompatible with terms of our author copyright transfer agreement. And in that case, we actually would not be able to consider the preprint. So if you are posting a preprint, you should look closely at the terms of any license being applied by the preprint server. And certainly if you have a question, you can reach out to the journal, to our staff, and we'll be happy to assist.
How important would you say the cover letter is in regard to submitting?
So there's different views out there on that if you kind of ask different editors. So we've taken the approach of making it optional as part of submission. So really try to simplify and streamline that submission process for the authors. I'd say classically, maybe the cover letters could have two roles. One is that might be a place where authors will include various attestations, or kind of more administrative or technical things, so that the work is not under consideration with another journal. It may include certain disclosures for the authors, document that all the authors have contributed to the work. So we've moved those into the submission interface, so that doesn't require the letter per se. Then other times the letter is used also by the author. So maybe make the case for why the journal should publish the article, why it's of interest to the journal and its audience. So I've kind of had the view that should really be clear from the manuscript itself. And I mean, maybe I was hate to say this, but sometimes I've seen it where the cover letter puts in some positive spin, or maybe it asserts some impact from the article that's beyond the actual data when you start going through the manuscript itself. So it's kind of building up the study and kind of doing a more of a sell of it, kind of building up that case to try to convince the editor. So I really try to be objective, focus on the article itself, the data, the results, really what's supported by the actual evidence in the work. So it's kind of taking that perspective. I'd say the cover letter ends up being actually not all that much impact, to the point that I said, we've actually made it optional.
Now, what kind of feedback do you typically get from an author if there is a rejection?
So that's a really good question. I remember when starting in this role, that was one thing I was kind of wondering how that would play out, and how much myself and the editorial team would hear from authors, say after an article is rejected. So I'd say it's actually has not been all that frequent. I'd say it's been uncommon, but certainly does happen at times. And we do want to take it seriously when that feedback comes back from an author. I'd say this kind of falls into two kind of different kind of buckets or categories in terms of the issue at hand. So this would be if it's a manuscript that's rejected without review versus rejected with a review, and just in terms of the type of the interaction or discussion. So if it's rejected without review, then that decision lacks the full set of feedback and comments that you would have if the manuscript were to go to external peer review, right? So it doesn't have all that full kind of context about the decision as you would have when you have numerous reviewers doing a detailed review. So sometimes the author will reach out and want more explanation for why it wasn't sent to peer review, kind of more of an explanation, just for the sheer volume of manuscripts that we receive. And, we really do try to focus our time and effort on the works that we will be publishing, trying to take the articles that will ultimately be in the journal and spend our efforts for that work to be as strong as possible. We just really aren't positioned to give detailed comments for manuscripts that are rejected without review. But if there is a question from the author, we will, give some comments, some follow-up, some discussion. If you do have a manuscript that's rejected without review, you certainly can, ask for some more explanation or comments, and we'll be happy to have that. If it's rejected after review, then now you have the feedback from the reviewers that kind of gives more, critique. When we get feedback from the authors in that circumstance, it's usually that they feel they can actually address the comments, right? That they feel they can make the changes. And that's certainly a very common reaction, right? As an author, a lot of times you'll feel like, well, I can actually address this and address those, and actually really address the bulk of those. Certainly when I submitted as an author and received a rejection, I often felt like, well, actually I could really address the bulk or the thrust of these comments. And often I'd say what the explanation gets to, it's really kind of an understanding that the reviewers are just kind of one piece of it all, right? So the editors, we're not just, intermediaries between the authors and the reviewers. There really is an editor discretion and judgment in terms of our, view of the journal. And there's lots of factors, where we're trying to steer the journal, the direction, our priorities, strategy, vision, how that work fits into the journal overall. And also just what else we're getting at that time in that area, right? So maybe we have another paper in the pipeline on that topic that's very similar, or is it just a topic we just published a lot on recently? And there's some other areas where we just haven't published quite as much. So, maybe even if, or maybe that you can actually address the comments, but there was just one particular comment that we just thought was just too fundamental, too major, just too big an issue to look past. So there's kind of the synthesis of all these factors that play into our decision. So often, we got it, we reflected on it, it was very deliberate. We may have been aware that many of these comments could be addressed, but even with that, even if considering we got a revision back and these issues were addressed, it just wasn't something we were looking to proceed with, at this time. So I think just kind of some awareness of kind of how we're approaching it by authors, I think can be helpful in that situation.
We've talked a lot about original research. On the review side, what do you look for?
Our peer reviewers are absolutely essential to our output. I've heard a number of editors say that they see their reviewers as kind of almost their secret sauce, and just really so crucial just for our article selection and also for strengthening the articles along the way. So just some kind of comments regarding those reviews. So I'd say that the reviews, these should not essentially be taking the approach of, say, almost doing, say, a copy edit of the article and focusing on, grammar, punctuation, spelling, or maybe some formatting details. So that's not really what we're asking the reviewers to do. If the article is ultimately, accepted for publication, our team will take care of that. We have an excellent staff and an amazing copy editing team who will deal with those issues. We're asking the peer reviewers to review the work based on their scientific expertise, their subject matter expertise, their knowledge of that material, that topic, and we really want their opinion and insights on the science. So this ends up being more of a big picture thing. So the impact, some assessment of is the article interesting? Is this important? Is this really add to the field? So some kind of high level feedback on the work, but then that should also be coupled with then some detailed comments. So yes, that global assessment, but just that general assessment alone is not sufficient. So these are often structured as kind of like two parts. There's kind of like the general comments, but then the detailed comments, and this should cover all aspects of the article. So if it's original research, abstract, intro, methods, results, discussion, references, tables, and figures. So it should be itemized, detailed, part by part of the article. You give specific feedback and comments as to how it can be improved. I say less important is the assessment of whether the article should be published or not. We do get that summary recommendation from the reviewer, which they select from our drop-down menu. That summary recommendation should not be in the review, right? Because it could be confusing for authors if that doesn't match our actual or our final recommendation. But what I say is that's not so much what we're looking for in terms of the reviewers, just ultimate kind of binary, publish or not. That comes from the editorial board. What we want from the reviewers is, their overall sense and, how can this be improved? How can this be made better? Whether or not this is, recommended for publication or not. So, even if, say, this is going to be rejected after review, that reviewer feedback and comments as to how to strengthen the work can be so valuable for the authors as they prepare future submissions of the manuscript for other journals. Or even if the reviewers think, this should be, they support or they favor publication, anything can be improved. There's always, ways to make it better, make a more compelling argument, or kind of, strengthen the level of evidence in the setting of an original research study. So even if it's supporting it, still going through and giving, suggestions and ideas as to how it can be, how it can be made a more powerful article.
What are some of the ways that you can get involved with the journal?
Well, one way for sure, just to show your interest in the journal, is to submit articles as an author. We have a wide variety of article types, from original research to reviews, full length, short length, various commentaries, and then editorial article types. So you can go to our author guidelines, see the options, and think if there's something that you'd be interested in submitting. You can also serve as a reviewer for the journal, and we're very open to individuals who express interest in doing that. You can just send along a CV to the journal office at ajrsubmit@arrs.org, or send it to me as the editor-in-chief, along with your areas of interest for reviewing. We're happy to consider that. Each January, we name new assistant editors to our editorial board, which are selected from among our top reviewers from the prior period. And the assistant editors get an opportunity to weigh in on the journal content in terms of proposing topics for review articles that we periodically solicit. our senior most editors at the kind of highest tier in editorial board are then often selected from among the assistant editors. So there's kind of a progression there that can sometimes be followed in going from assistant editor, a reviewer, to assistant editor to a higher level. We also have editorial fellowships, the Figley Fellow and Rogers Fellow, where individuals apply and then are selected and spend time with myself and the publications team, learning all about radiology journalism. And it's a very hands-on, practical experience, working closely together for a good amount of time as we just kind of get to see the day in the life of the editor and all the kind of the different things we do and kind of some of the stuff behind the scenes and putting the journal out. And over the years, we've introduced more kind of opportunities to apply and get involved in different aspects of the journal. Most recently, we have our podcast series. These are monthly audio episodes that run for a year on a given topic. And now we've opened that up for applications. And if somebody has an idea, we let them apply to then run and lead a series for the year. And I can tell you what we just finished making selections for this year, and we had some really great applications on or proposals on a very diverse range of topics and ideas. And we're looking forward to seeing those now come to fruition. And just I'd finally know each year at the Rank and Ray meeting, we've had a 2-hour session Sunday morning, all about the journal and what's new, where we're going the year ahead. We take questions. And we had a good turnout there, and I've had some really good conversations with authors, reviewers, readers there. Just sometimes where they've expressed their thoughts of the journal, some stuff they'd be interested in seeing. So you're always free to come to that event as well.
Now, specifically for trainees, what advice would you have for them in terms of first steps in getting involved?
Yeah, so the trainees are really critical to the journal and our future. So we have a trainee editorial board. We take applications each spring, and we're actually currently in the process of getting applications as we're having this session. The primary activity has been, for the trainees, has been to do podcasts where they're analyzing recent articles we published. It's actually been really interesting to hear their perspectives and their takes on the work. Sometimes they'll interview faculty at their institutions on the articles and have some really good discussions. We also have periodic meetings throughout the year for the members of the trainee editorial board, just with the journal editors, and we talk about all the different topics of the day in radiology research and publication. We have an article type, the trainee essay, which is open to trainees at any level to submit, which is basically a personal reflection on an experience that the trainee has had, where they give a narrative account and then their lessons learned. There's actually been a lot of interest in that article type, and we publish a good number of them. So it's been so I've been happy to see how the article type has taken off, and these have covered all types of areas, and the trainees have really shared some I think interesting and useful experiences. And then we've also had just some trainees over the years who've led various other just kind of social media or digital media initiatives for the journal. Sometimes they kind of pitched something, or we just were kind of struck up a conversation and led to then leading some activity for some period of time. We've had some trainees who led some monthly tweet chats. We've also had some trainees who were helping to lead tweetorials for the journal, and we now have those archived on our website. So I guess we're also open to ideas. So feel free to be in touch. If you're a trainee and there's something you'd be interested in, maybe leading or running with for the journal.
Dr. Rosenkrantz, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. It was my pleasure.